The CEO invited me to lunch, not at the cafeteria or a casual corner spot, but at Maxwell's, a white tablecloth restaurant where contracts get signed and careers quietly ended. I knew something was wrong the second Preston Campbell ordered wine before the waiter even brought water. He made small talk, like it mattered, then said it, "Derek, we're going in a different direction." I smiled. These things happen. He looked relieved I wasn't making a scene. What he didn't know was I had seen this coming for months. My name's Derek Marshall. I'm 42, and for the past 11 years, I've been the invisible engine behind Riverton Manufacturing's entire tech backbone. Not that you'd know it from the glossy quarterly reports or the corporate website. I built our cybersecurity protocols when we were still running Windows XP and storing passwords on sticky notes. I turned a 5-person help desk into a 30-person force that kept 3 production plants running non-stop in Milwaukee. I was never supposed to be here this long. I took the job after my divorce. Something to do while I sorted myself out. But I was good at it. Really good. And somewhere between server rebuilds and ransomware recoveries, I made the system mine. Not on paper, but in the way only people who build from zero can understand. Back at my desk, I noticed my admin credentials had already been downgraded. My name was gone from the leadership distribution list. They decided before lunch, probably weeks before. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not out of anger or fear, but because of what I'd seen in the access logs 3 months earlier. Unauthorized probes from an IP tied to the executive floor. Someone had been digging through my documentation, reading through protocols, scanning plans that only I should have touched. They weren't just replacing me. They were trying to extract me. 16 years ago, I moved to Milwaukee for Elio. My ex-wife left a decent job in Minneapolis because she got into grad school here. We were young, certain, hopeful. 7 years in, I came home to find a manila envelope on the kitchen counter. No yelling, no scandal, just, "We want different things." Riverton hired me when I was crashing on my brother's couch. They'd just suffered a ransomware attack and needed someone who could keep the bleeding from turning fatal. I was meant to be a stopgap, but I saw potential. These people knew machinery, not systems. Their entire operation, millions in hardware, was running on barely patched software, a crash away from chaos. I pitched Preston a 5-year modernization plan. No, he gave me budget. I gave him uptime, visibility, and peace of mind. When the Northeast blackout hit, and every other plant in our sector went dark, we stayed online. After that, my team tripled. My budget exploded, and I got a seat in strategy meetings. I hired Vanessa, sharp, focused, loyal. I brought in Luis, brilliant, fast, and fearless with code. We weren't just IT anymore. We were Riverton's nervous system. In 2019, Harrison Wells, the owner, shook my hand at the company holiday party and said, "You modernized us. Derek, couldn't have done this expansion without your systems." I believed him. I thought I'd finally found my place. Then last September, a consultant showed up out of nowhere, asking questions about systems I had architected myself. When I asked who sent him, he mentioned leadership and moved on. Not long after, I lost access to board materials. Preston canceled our weekly briefings with polite excuses. At the New Year retreat, I overheard Harrison bragging about his nephew Nathan, fresh out of MIT, brilliant with systems, he said. Offers from everywhere. I should have seen it then, but I didn't. 2 days after Maxwell's, I stood alone in the server room at 7 Wapoy, staring at the blinking lights that had become my second home. That space was mine. I had designed it, cooled it, scaled it. Then I heard footsteps. Nathan Blake walked in, clean-shaven, Rolex wearing, confidence dripping off every gesture. "Just getting a feel for the setup," he said. I nodded. "Let me know if you need anything." He looked over the racks, like he was inspecting a used car. "Documentation is thorough," he added. some modernization opportunities. He said it like a compliment. When he left, I pulled up the logs. Nathan had been given full admin access 3 weeks ago. Before my lunch, he'd already downloaded my entire documentation library. I texted Luis, "Coffee tomorrow. Joe's Cafe, 6:30. That night, I drove to the lake, where Ellie and I used to sit and watch the sun go down. I thought about the day Preston promoted me to director. "You're the backbone," he said. "We couldn't run without you." Turns out, backbones can be replaced. The next morning, Luis was already at the cafe when I walked in. "They're phasing me out," I said. He nodded. I figured, "They've been asking me weird questions, trying to get me to explain your systems." He looked down. "I'm sorry. I should have said something. You've got a mortgage. Kids. I don't blame you. What's my plan?" "Right?" He didn't speak. I looked out the window, watching the early commuters flood the streets. "They think everything's in the docks," I said. "But it's not. Not the patches, not the side protocols, not the custom middleware. That's all me." Luis leaned forward. "You're not going to burn it all down, are you?" I shook my head. "I'm not sabotaging anything, but I'm also not giving away what's mine." He studied me. "What do you need?" "Backups, logs, anything that proves what I built. I need to know who's still loyal." He nodded slowly. "I'm with you." 1 week later, Preston stood at the podium during an all-hands meeting, beaming with practice sincerity. "We're excited about the future," he said. "Fresh leadership, fresh perspective. Derek's contributions have been invaluable, and he'll be working closely with Nathan to ensure a smooth transition." Nathan smiled like he'd earned it. The team looked stunned. Vanessa found my eyes across the room. Silent, searching. I gave her the smallest nod. After the meeting, I requested a sit-down with Preston and Diane from HR. I pointed out that certain systems being transitioned weren't developed under my employment, but prior, System Sync, in particular, which I had licensed to Riverton. Don slid a folder toward me. "Anything developed during your tenure belongs to the company." I tapped the original contract. "Not this. Clause 12. I retained ownership." Preston shifted in his seat. "That was over a decade ago, and every update since was built on that foundation. I'm not asking for a fight. I'm asking for fair value." Preston hesitated. "We'll review it." I knew that meant delay. The next morning, my access to the dev servers was revoked. Nathan hosted a team meeting without me. I went anyway. "We're restructuring the network architecture," he said confidently. "Simplifying things?" "Which part?" I asked. "Production floor. Those failover protocols aren't optional," I said. "They prevent critical load failures." Vanessa spoke up. "Those designs kept us online during the 2018 surge." Nathan smiled thinly. "We're streamlining. No more legacy crutches." I left without another word. That night, I received an email from legal. Riverton now claimed full ownership of System Sync. They offered me $5 as a buyout. They thought I would fold. They had no idea what was coming. Monday morning came fast, but I was already 3 steps ahead. By the time I walked into the office, I'd documented every line of original code tied to System Sync, cross-referenced it with the early licensing emails I'd archived off-network, and sent everything to my attorney for safekeeping, just in case they decided to get aggressive. Luis had stayed up half the night, helping me scrape deployment logs, version histories, and proof that key frameworks had originated from my own hardware before I ever signed a contract with Riverton, because as much as they wanted to paint everything I built as corporate property, I had receipts, and those receipts had teeth. So when I got the email from HR confirming my transition would be shortened from 6 weeks to 2, I didn't flinch. Preston framed it as a strategic decision, said they needed to move swiftly, and that I should focus on documentation handoff and keeping things smooth for Nathan. But everyone knew what was really happening. They were trying to erase me before I could make noise, before I could complicate the acquisition They were quietly lining up behind closed doors. I hadn't confirmed it yet, but I'd felt it in every shift, every rumor, every closed-door conversation. Something big was in motion, and I was being silenced to protect it. That night, I met Luis in the parking lot of a grocery store, just off the interstate. No cameras, no witnesses, just two former teammates standing under flickering sodium lights, like something out of a spy movie. He handed me a flash drive. No words needed, just a nod. And I asked him, "Why are you helping me?" And he said, "Because they think we're all replaceable, and I'm not going to let them get away with that." I went home, plugged in the drive, and found exactly what I needed. Unredacted deployment architecture, credentials history, install scripts, and a full change log of every version pushed into production. With my name on it, I didn't sleep, didn't need to, because I had focus now, clarity like a blade. By morning, I had already filed provisional patents on the three most critical components of System Sync, just enough to legally block any third-party acquisition attempt without a license. And while my lawyer reviewed the finer language in my original Riverton contract, I contacted Darren Phillips, a friend from my early security days, now an independent network consultant who knew how to dig without leaving footprints. He owed me a favor, and when I explained the situation, he said, "Let me poke around," which meant something's about to come up. 2 nights later, he called at 11:04 p.m. and said, "You're not going to like this," and he sent over a trail of SEC filings and internal financial summaries that confirmed everything I'd suspected. Riverton was in late-stage acquisition talks with TechCore Industries, a Boston-based manufacturing conglomerate, and the deal was being driven by a promise of modernized, proprietary infrastructure with minimal transition risk. Which sounded suspiciously like the language I used in my 2018 architecture report. Darren dug deeper and found that the valuation for the sale included a detailed breakdown of our systems, my systems, listed as proprietary company assets, despite no mention of licensing agreements or third-party tech. They were selling System Sync as their own. And not just that. They were selling me out of the narrative completely, while Nathan was presented in internal memos as the architect of Riverton's next-gen transformation. A kid who hadn't even seen a production line until 3 weeks ago. What broke me wasn't the sale. It was seeing the internal email Preston sent to TechCore leadership 6 months ago, listing transition plans, and Nathan's name as future director of IT systems. Dated the same week I worked 3 consecutive overnight shifts, patching a vulnerability that could have brought down the entire supplier network during holiday peak season. While I was pulling miracles, they were writing me out of the story. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, walked straight to Vanessa's desk, and handed her a sealed envelope. "If anything strange happens this week, anything at all, open this," I said, and she didn't ask questions, just nodded, because she knew something was wrong, and had probably known for weeks. I spent the next 2 days acting like the model employee, attending meetings, answering Nathan's questions, logging every access point he touched, and silently watching as he struggled to understand the layers of abstraction I'd built to protect our systems from the very kind of executive sabotage he now represented. What he didn't know was that Luis and I had already moved the most sensitive components off premises to a private server with audit tracking, license keys, and control logic that no one at Riverton even knew existed. I wasn't going to destroy anything. I was going to make sure the value I created wasn't hijacked by someone who didn't earn it. By Thursday night, the countdown had begun. I implemented a silent update to System Sync across all nodes, activating a validation sequence that would check the license status upon my exit and enter a limited functionality mode unless a renewal agreement was executed. No data would be lost. No systems wiped, but the platform would refuse right-level access and halt integrations with external vendors after a grace period of 8 days, just long enough for the truth to catch up. I encrypted the configuration files, documented every action, and sent a time-stamped summary to my lawyer and Darren with a simple subject line: Final safeguard initiated. The next morning, I turned in my badge, signed the paperwork, skipped the catered goodbye lunch Nathan had arranged, and walked out of the building for the last time without looking back, because I already knew that by the time the license check failed and Riverton's production lines ground to a halt, they'd have no choice but to call the one person they spent months trying to erase. Monday morning, Navi Dizisaja. Precisely when the production floor ramped up for peak operation, every Riverton terminal running system sync flashed the same alert. License expired. Please contact the developer to renew. By 9:20, the first line shut down. By 9:43, all 3 facilities had halted. Phones started ringing. Vendor integrations failed. Executives panicked. And at 10:30, Preston Campbell called me, his voice trying and failing to sound composed. "Derek, what the hell did you do?" he snapped. But I stayed calm, leaning back in my chair at home. As the morning sun poured in through my kitchen window, "I didn't do anything," I said plainly. "The software license expired. It was never owned by Riverton, only licensed. You'll find the agreement in your legal department's inbox." Silence, followed by the sound of him fumbling for an argument. "This is sabotage," he barked. "This is theft." "No," I said, still level. "This is business. And this is what happens when you try to sell something that doesn't belong to you." I heard him exhale like a man trying not to explode. "We'll take legal action," he threatened. But the words rang hollow. "Check Clause 7. I replied. "Original agreement. Integration, not acquisition. And for the record, I've sent everything to my lawyer and outside counsel. I'm not interested in a fight. I'm offering you terms." That afternoon, Riverton's legal department confirmed receipt of my licensing proposal. Compensation aligned with industry IP valuation standards, retroactive credit for development, and a non-disclosure clause regarding the circumstances of my departure. They didn't have a choice. Their entire production schedule was a stage to my architecture, but not because I'd built a bomb, because they never understood what they were standing on. By T5 to a T-po. They signed, and just like that, I was paid for what I created, fairly, legally, and on my terms. But I wasn't done. 3 days later, I sat across from the VP of Operations at Tech Core Industries in a glass-walled office overlooking downtown Boston. "We're moving ahead with the Riverton acquisition," he said, sliding a proposal across the table. "But we'd like you to lead the technical integration as an external consultant. Not just the systems, but the people too." The offer doubled my former salary, came with total control over timelines and deliverables, and allowed me to work remotely. "And Nathan Blake?" I asked, not even trying to hide my curiosity. The VP offered a wry smile. "He'll be transitioning to other opportunities. Apparently, a few major clients threatened to walk after the system sync disruption. It raised questions about leadership." I signed that afternoon. By the following week, Vanessa had joined my consulting team, followed shortly by Luis, then 3 more former engineers from my old department. I didn't have to recruit them. They came looking for me. Within 2 months, half the original IT division that built Riverton's modern foundation was now working under my umbrella. Not as subordinates, but as partners. We rebranded under a new name, Signal Tier, and started fielding inquiries from companies I'd never heard of, all asking the same question: "Can you help us rebuild what Riverton had?" I didn't say yes to everyone. I picked clients who respected the work, who valued the people behind the platforms. Months passed. I settled into a new rhythm. My mornings were mine again. No fire drills, No midnight system alerts, just focused work, fair contracts, and a team that knew exactly what we stood for. I bought a small cabin by Lake Geneva. Nothing fancy, just a quiet place where I could step out onto the deck, breathe, and watch the water move without deadlines chasing me. One afternoon, nearly a year after the day I walked out of Riverton, I ran into Preston at a downtown restaurant. He was dining alone, scanning his phone, looking smaller than I remembered. We locked eyes for a moment. He hesitated, then stood and walked over. "You won," he said flatly. I studied his face, the lines, the fatigue, the barely held pride. I shook my head. "It was never about winning," I said. "It was about not being erased, about knowing my value and refusing to hand it away." He nodded once, then left. I sat there a long time after, sipping my coffee, staring out the window. As the sun dipped behind the buildings, some battles you fight loud, others you fight with silence, documents, and clarity. I didn't destroy Riverton. I protected what was mine and let the rest fall under the weight of its own arrogance. 6 months after walking out of Riverton, I found myself standing on the porch of my lake cabin, coffee in hand, watching morning fog curl over the water. And for the first time in years, I wasn't preparing for a crisis, wasn't building someone else's empire under someone else's name. I was building my own, and it felt right. Signal tier had grown faster than I expected. By now, we had a dozen clients, 5 consultants, and a backlog that would have made my old department jealous. And the best part, no middle managers second-guessing every decision. No backroom politics, just results. Vanessa ran operations, Luis led engineering, and I focused on strategy and client onboarding, which meant I spent more time listening than coding. And strangely, I liked that. Turns out giving people a platform to do great work and watching them own, it was even more satisfying than doing it all myself. Still, I didn't forget where I came from. Riverton's ghost lingered, especially when I saw TechCore's monthly performance reports, where System Sync, now officially licensed under my name, was listed as a core strategic advantage in bold type. They'd learned fast not to mess with me again, especially when the first post-acquisition audit revealed that several of Nathan's rushed infrastructure changes had led to cascading failures across supplier integrations, costing them 3 clients and over $500,000 in SLA penalties. Nathan had been officially let go, with the usual sanitized language, pursuing new opportunities. But insiders knew the truth. He had been in over his head from day one. And when the scaffolding I'd built was removed, everything he tried to stand on crumbled. I never celebrated his fall, though I didn't need to. Vindication had already arrived the day TechCore rehired my team as consultants and gave us full control over rebuilding what Nathan had broken. Preston, meanwhile, faded into obscurity, still holding the title of Senior Executive Advisor, but with no actual influence or authority. He sent me an email once, a vague gesture about reconnecting and moving forward. But I never replied. Not out of spite, but because there was nothing left to say. He made his decisions, and I made mine. What mattered now was that I had something no one could take from me again. Control, respect, and a track record that didn't require anyone else's validation. Signal Tier was now advising 3 other manufacturers on digital overhauls, and each of those contracts included licensing clauses that were airtight. My lawyer and I had learned every lesson Riverton taught us and built protections into every line. One of those clients flew me out to Seattle last month for a speaking engagement, my first time on a stage in years, and as I stood there talking about scalable infrastructure, resilience design, and why internal ownership of technical vision matters, I saw something in the audience I hadn't seen in a long time. Respect without politics, without agenda, just real recognition of real work. Afterward, A young engineer came up and said, "I read about the Riverton thing. You're kind of a legend." And I smiled, shook his hand, and said, "Legends are usually people who stayed quiet too long, then finally decided to speak." And he laughed. But I meant every word. Now, every Sunday night, instead of dreading another 5 call about a broken vendor API or a production floor outage, I sit on that porch, watch the moon reflect off the lake, and think about systems, not just servers and code, but people, trust, boundaries, and what happens when you build without protecting yourself. I think about how many like me are still buried in basements and server rooms across the country, building miracles that no one notices until they break. And I hope they read this someday, or hear about it, and realize you are not replaceable. You're just quiet. And sometimes the world mistakes quiet for disposable. Don't let them. Own what you build. Protect what's yours. And if they ever try to take it from you, walk out calm, walk out clean, and make sure they know that you were the firewall all along.